Hey there, friend, yeah, you, the one scrolling late at night with a heavy heart, maybe a single parent wiping tears in the dark or someone who's lost more than words can hold. If you've ever felt like the world forgot about you, like one small choice couldn't possibly matter in the grand scheme of pain, then lean in close and stay with me until the very last word. Because this story isn't just about a single dad and a powerful CEO, it's about the moment two shattered souls collided over a simple misplaced package, and how that one act of quiet integrity rewrote 3 lives forever. Stick around till the end, because when the final light breaks through these pages, I promise you'll feel something shift inside your own chest, and maybe, just maybe, you'll believe again that kindness still has the power to heal what grief tried to destroy. In the gray drizzle of Portland, Maine, Marcus Hale wiped the sweat from his brow and stared at the brown cardboard box sitting on the passenger seat of his beat-up Ford pickup. It was just after 6 on a Tuesday evening, the kind of evening where the wind off the Atlantic cut straight through his thin jacket and reminded him how alone the world could feel. At 34, Marcus had already buried the only woman he'd ever loved, his wife, Elena, taken by a sudden heart condition 2 years earlier, and now he was raising their 6-year-old daughter Sophie on a warehouse supervisor's salary that barely covered rent, groceries, and the mounting medical bills from Elena's final months. Every night Sophie asked the same question while clutching her mother's faded scarf, "Daddy, when is Mommy coming home from her long sleep?" And every night Marcus swallowed the lump in his throat and whispered, "Soon, baby girl. Soon." The package had been a mistake at the warehouse, an overnight delivery meant for some big-shot executive across town, but the address label had gotten soaked in a forklift spill and the driver had simply dropped it on Marcus's desk with a shrug. "Return it yourself, man. Company policy." Marcus could have tossed it in the outgoing bin and forgotten about it. Lord knows he needed every extra hour of overtime just to buy Sophie new winter boots. But something in him, the same stubborn integrity Elena had loved, wouldn't let him. "If it were mine," he muttered to the empty truck, "I'd want someone to care." So after clocking out, he punched the address into his cracked phone screen and drove 20 minutes through winding coastal roads until the modest neighborhoods gave way to iron gates and oceanfront estates. The mansion that appeared at the end of the private drive looked like something out of a magazine, 3 stories of glass and stone perched on a cliff, waves crashing below like they were trying to drag the whole house into the sea. Marcus parked, grabbed the box, and walked up the marble steps feeling every inch the outsider in his scuffed work boots and faded flannel. He rang the bell once, twice. No answer. Just as he was about to set the package down and leave, the massive door cracked open. The woman standing there was not what he expected. Victoria Langford, CEO of Langford Tech, the tech empire that employed half the city, was supposed to be untouchable, sharp-suited, ice-cold. Instead she looked like a ghost in silk. Her once elegant blonde hair hung limp around a face pale with exhaustion, dark circles under eyes that had clearly cried for days. She wore an oversized cashmere sweater that swallowed her slender frame, and in her trembling hand she clutched a small silver picture frame. The moment she saw Marcus, her shoulders sagged as if the weight of pretending had finally snapped. I didn't order anything," she whispered, voice hoarse. "Please, just leave it." Marcus shifted uncomfortably. "Ma'am, it's addressed to you. Got lost at the warehouse where I work. Figured it was important, didn't want it sitting around." He held out the box, but she didn't take it. Instead her gaze dropped to the frame in her hand, a photo of a smiling teenage boy with the same sharp blue eyes she had. Marcus recognized that look instantly. It was the same emptiness he saw in his own mirror every morning after Sophie finally fell asleep. Victoria's lip quivered. "My son. Ethan. He would have been 18 last week. This house was supposed to be full of his laughter, his friends, his future. Instead it's just me and the silence." The words tumbled out like they'd been locked away too long. Marcus stood frozen on the doorstep, rain dripping from his hair, the package suddenly feeling heavier than any weight he'd ever lifted at work. He thought of Sophie waiting at their neighbor's apartment, of the empty chair at their tiny kitchen table, of the way Elena's perfume still lingered faintly on her pillow. Before he could stop himself, he said softly, "I know what that kind of quiet feels like. Lost my wife 2 years ago. Every room still whispers her name." For the first time in months, Victoria's eyes truly focused on another human being. She stepped aside without a word, and Marcus, against every instinct that screamed he didn't belong, walked into the marble foyer. The house smelled of salt air and expensive candles that had burned down to stubs. Victoria led him to a vast living room overlooking the stormy ocean, and they sat across from each other on opposite ends of a leather couch that probably cost more than Marcus's entire truck. She opened the package with shaking fingers. Inside was a simple black hoodie with Ethan's high school football number stitched on the sleeve, the last thing she had ordered for him before the car accident that stole him away. Tears spilled down her cheeks as she clutched the hoodie to her chest. "I keep buying things for him, like if I just keep the receipts open, he might still come home." Marcus didn't offer empty platitudes. He simply reached into his wallet and pulled out a small, crumpled photo of Elena holding newborn Sophie. "I still set a place for her at dinner sometimes," he admitted, voice cracking. "Sophie thinks I'm just clumsy and drop an extra fork. But I do it so the emptiness doesn't swallow me whole. They talked until the rain turned to mist and the ocean calmed. Victoria learned that Marcus worked double shifts so Sophie could stay in the same school where Elena had taught kindergarten. Marcus learned that Victoria had built her empire after losing her own husband young, only to watch her only child slip away in an instant. Two strangers bound by the same cruel club no one wants to join. When Marcus finally stood to leave, Victoria pressed a check into his hand, far more than any delivery fee. He folded it back into her palm gently. "I didn't come for money, ma'am. Just figured someone should care enough to bring your package home." As he drove away that night, the mansion lights fading in his rearview mirror, Marcus had no idea he had just cracked open the door to a future neither of them could have imagined. But back inside the glass house on the cliff, Victoria Langford sat on the floor hugging her son's hoodie, whispering to the empty room, maybe I'm not as alone as I thought. The next morning, Marcus woke to Sophie's tiny hands shaking him. "Daddy, there's a fancy black car outside." He bolted upright, heart pounding, half expecting bill collectors or worse. Instead, a uniformed driver stood politely at the door holding an envelope. Inside was a handwritten note in elegant script. "Marcus, last night was the first time I didn't feel like I was drowning alone. Please bring Sophie to dinner tonight. No strings, just two parents who understand. Victoria." Sophie's eyes lit up at the word dinner, and Marcus couldn't say no. That evening they arrived at the mansion in their best, which wasn't much. Sophie, with her mother's dark curls and Marcus's warm brown eyes, clutched her stuffed rabbit and stared wide-eyed at the ocean. Victoria greeted them at the door wearing jeans and a soft sweater instead of power suits, her face softer than the night before. Dinner was simple, spaghetti and meatballs, the kind of meal Marcus could actually afford, served at a long table that suddenly didn't feel so empty. Sophie chattered about school, about missing her mommy's lullabies, and Victoria listened with tears she didn't hide. "My Ethan used to sing the silliest songs at this very table," she said, pulling out her phone to play an old video. The sound of a teenage boy's laughter filled the room, and for the first time in 2 years, Marcus laughed through his tears. But healing isn't a straight line. Over the following weeks, challenges crashed in like the very waves outside. Marcus's pride reared its head when Victoria quietly paid off his medical debts without asking, debts that had kept him awake at night. "I don't need charity," he snapped one evening when she offered him a better job at her company. "I've been taking care of my daughter alone just fine." Victoria's eyes flashed with the same fire that had built her empire. "This isn't charity, Marcus. It's friendship. Don't you dare push away the first real connection either of us has had since we lost them." They argued on the cliffside deck as the sun set, words sharp with old pain, until Sophie's small voice cut through, "Daddy, why are you yelling at the nice lady who made Mommy's favorite cookies?" The fight dissolved into quiet apologies and the realization that accepting help was sometimes the bravest thing a parent could do. Victoria faced her own storm. The board of her company wanted her to sell the mansion and move on. "It's time to let go of the past," they said. But every room held Ethan's ghost. One night she called Marcus at 2 a.m., voice breaking, "I can't sleep in this house anymore. It's too loud with everything he'll never do." Marcus drove over in the dark, Sophie asleep in the back seat, and they sat on the floor of Ethan's untouched bedroom surrounded by football trophies and video games. He didn't fix it with words. He simply listened while Victoria finally spoke the guilt she'd carried. "I was working late the night of the accident. If I'd been home," Marcus took her hand. "And I was driving Elena to the hospital when it happened. We both carry what-ifs that will drown us if we let them. But Sophie needs me here. And maybe Ethan would want you here too, not hiding, but living." Little by little, the broken pieces began fitting together in ways they never expected. Victoria started volunteering at Sophie's school, reading the same books Elena once taught. Marcus accepted the job, not out of pity, but because it let him coach the youth football team Ethan had loved. Sophie found a grandmother figure in Victoria, who taught her to bake Ethan's favorite chocolate chip cookies and let her run wild on the private beach. One golden afternoon, the three of them released paper lanterns into the sky, Sophie's for her mommy, Victoria's for her son, Marcus's for the wife he still loved. As the lights floated over the ocean, Sophie whispered, "Look, Daddy, they're not gone. They're just watching from up there." Months later, on the anniversary of Ethan's birthday, Victoria stood on the same marble steps where Marcus had first appeared and announced she was stepping back from the CEO role, not to disappear, but to start a foundation in Ethan's name, scholarships for kids who'd lost parents, grief counseling programs, and a summer camp where single dads like Marcus could bring their children to heal together. Marcus stood beside her, Sophie on his shoulders, wearing the black hoodie that had started it all. The media called it a miracle turnaround. They didn't know it had begun with one man refusing to ignore a lost package. And so, my friend, here we are at the end of their story, but really, it's only the beginning of yours. Because if a tired warehouse dad in scuffed boots and a grieving CEO in a lonely mansion could find light again through nothing more than honesty, listening, and the courage to stay when it hurt, then so can you. The next time life hands you a misplaced package, a broken heart, a second chance, a stranger who needs kindness, remember Marcus and Victoria. Small actions still change everything. You are never as alone as the silence tries to convince you. Keep showing up. Keep caring. And watch how the universe hands you back more light than you ever thought possible. Now go out there and be someone's turning point today. I'll see you in the comments. Tell me, what's the one small kindness you're going to offer this week? Because this story was written for you, and it's not over until you write the next chapter.